Ladies and gents, and welcome back to Silent Hunter with Mags and the Wolves of Steel mod. It has been some time since I've done a Silent Hunter 5 video, however they will be coming more commonly now, as I promised in my last Cold Waters video. So, for today's action, we have encountered two Polish destroyers. They're heading north and attempting to slip around the top of Denmark into the North Sea and into the safety of the Royal Navy's fleets. Now, they have just successfully managed to survive an attack by the Luftwaffe's JU-87 dive bombers, and they did spot us as we were submerging on our approach to their position, so they are aware of our presence. A small mistake on my part, but I was trying to get as close to these destroyers as possible, using the ship's surface speed before beginning the engagement. Now, while the destroyers themselves are aware of our presence and have fired on us, they are unaware of our current location and have not begun evasive maneuvers yet, so first torpedo in the water, and we'll see how this torpedo goes. Now, of course, this particular engagement is entirely fantasy. By September the 7th, 1939, all the Polish Navy had either been captured, destroyed, or had managed to make their way through to British-controlled waters under Operation Peking. In particular, the Polish destroyers Błyskawica, Grom, and Burza managed to sneak out of the Baltic Sea prior to the commencement of hostilities, escaping to the Scottish port of Leith and then forming up with the Royal Navy to act in unison against German forces. And unfortunately, our first torpedo missed, so I'm attempting a snapshot with torpedo 2 and pulling our periscope down so we're not engaged with close-range machine gun fire from the destroyer. And that was really close. Not to mention, the destroyer is aware that I am very close because it's dropping depth charges. Now, this unfortunately leaves me in a position where I am now between two Polish destroyers, but we're not quite done here just yet. While the actual engagement taking place here may be entirely fantasy, the date September the 7th, 1939 actually does have some significance in regards to the aforementioned destroyers and a U-boat. But before we get into that, we have the second destroyer in the battle group coming up. And torpedo 3 is in the water. Torpedo hit almost directly on the rear fuel tanks, just ahead of the rearmost engine compartment. The resulting explosion would have likely ripped a hole between the main fuel tanks, igniting the internal fuel reserves and blowing the bulkhead between the fuel tanks and the engine compartment in half, exposing both to seawater. Not to mention probably damaging the reduction gear and the main prop shaft. So her engine's out and she's going to sink. There's no reason to pay any more attention to her. We've got another destroyer to deal with. Unfortunately, since I've engaged the second destroyer in the group, the first destroyer is now at my rear and in the process of circling back around to begin a second attack pass on my location. And speaking of submarines coming under attack by Polish destroyers, after making it to the Scottish port of Leith, the destroyer Błyskawica was assigned a patrol route covering the waters around Scotland. On the 7th of September 1939, just after dawn, the destroyer encountered a German Type 7 U-boat on the surface recharging its batteries, 10 miles southeast of South Uist Island. The Błyskawica charged the location as the U-boat submerged and engaged it with depth charges, but it managed to escape. It was the first of the surviving Polish destroyers and one of the first destroyers under Royal Naval Command to engage a submerged German U-boat in the war. So if being one of the most advanced destroyers afloat at the time that the war broke out wasn't enough, it also had a highly aggressive captain and wasted absolutely no time after arriving into its new situation to find a fight to get itself into. Anyways, back to the Grom-class destroyers we have at hand. The lead destroyer has now made its turn and is heading back in our direction, and we only have two torpedoes left available, one in tube 4 and one in the rear tube. Now, we do have reserves, of course, we can reload these, but we are using the Wolves of Steel mod, which is absolute realism. So reloading the torpedoes is not something that happens in 30 seconds or a minute. It will require a significant amount of time to be able to do. I'm effectively going to get 2 shots at this destroyer to take it out. If I miss with the forward and rear tube, I'm going to have to disengage from this fight in order to find the time to reload the tube. I'm going to have to dive deep and run. And we're hearing explosions go off in the background there as the second destroyer begins to explode as the fire slowly makes its way through the hull. And the sound no submarine captain ever wants to hear. At this point I'm just tracking the Grom to see exactly how she's going to react. She's already at 90 degrees or almost 90 degrees off our starboard side, so we cannot engage with the forward tubes at this point, but we can ready the aft torpedo tube, and if she comes in behind us, we may have a chance to have a shot at her. Now I've got the tube set to high speed, so I don't have to give too much lead here. And torpedo away. Unfortunately, she saw the torpedo and started to engage with machine gun fire at close range. So I had to retract the periscope and start diving for a little bit of extra depth. I also failed to give anywhere near enough lead to that torpedo, even on a high speed setting, so it just whizzed by the stern of the ship. Close, but no hit. I also hadn't realised it at this point, but I had retracted the periscope just a little bit too slow. Some of the machine gun fire had actually managed to clip the periscope, and while the damage was repairable, it's not going to be repairable in battle, so I've just lost the primary attack periscope. It won't go up. Now this doesn't take me completely out of the fight right away. I do have other options available. The attack periscope is designed for exactly what I'm doing here. However, there is an observation periscope that is available as well. It doesn't have the fancy targeting computer, although I'm not using most of its features at this point in time. But it still will do the job. But for the moment, I need to make sure that our Grom-class destroyer that's stalking us at the moment isn't quite aware of where we are, or at least loses us. So at this point, we've set our depth for 30 meters, so we're in a very slow dive, and we are at a head slow. I'm just going to drop down to touch 30 meters, and then I'm going to bring the ship back to periscope depth, but I'm going to do it with the speed set to 0, so we're just using our general forward movement and buoyancy to bring ourselves back up. Hopefully, the destroyer will be passing in front of us for our last tube. Now we can see we have 2 reloads here on the ground ready to rock and roll, but they will take time to actually load in, which is why I haven't ordered them. They're also noisy to load in as well, and this destroyer is definitely listening for us. And it was this point, while I'm doing a tour of the forward of the ship and checking our reserves, that our first victim finally decided to surrender to the inevitable. So having touched 30 meters and brought ourselves back to the surface, it's time to deploy the observation periscope and see whether or not we can finally end this engagement. Now I'm trying to only just bring the observation periscope out of the water here, so it's not too noticeable. And there she is.
171 degrees.
Course around. Torpedo tubes 4 is already ready, and I accidentally hit the wrong switch. I want the magnetic detonators on. Just judging its speed, depth is right. And I'm just comparing how quickly it's taking to move across my nose in comparison to our current heading, so I can get a rough idea where to lead this shot. What I'm doing here is checking the ship's movement over time and using that to work out my lead. And torpedo in the water. And as it turns out, it was a pretty good job, even if I do say so myself. The torpedo is going to land in exactly the same place, or almost exactly the same place, as the first destroyer I sunk. Straight into the rear fuel tanks, right behind the rear engine compartment. Again, blowing bulkheads apart, damaging the production gears, damaging the steering gears, damaging the main propulsion shaft, along with exposing the entirety of the rear of the ship, plus the mid-engine compartments to seawater. It's a killing blow. That being said, it could still take between 10 minutes and an hour for this Grom-class destroyer to actually sink. And while the crew should be evacuating the ship at this time, some will still be manning the guns, simply to try and defend the ship for as long as possible to allow the rest of the crew to evacuate. If I was to surface the boat right now, I would likely be engaged and could potentially be damaged, and I've already taken more damage than I was anticipating in this particular engagement. So I'm going to stay submerged and begin to exit out of the zone, heading north for the North Sea and the British Isles. There's a tonnage war on and I don't want to be late. Anyways, ladies and gents, this has been the return of Silent Hunter 5 to the channel. I already have a couple of other videos that are ready to go through the final editing process, so they should be up fairly regularly. As always, feel free to check the video description down below. There you'll find links to my Patreon if you would like to help support the channel. You'll also find links to my Facebook, my Twitter, and to my Twitch streams, which I haven't been doing as many of recently due to internet connection issues, but I should be resuming very, very soon. And as always, remember to click that like button and that notification button to ensure you get notified of each and every one of my uploads. And subscribe if you want to see more and haven't done so already. And until next time, take care.